Imagine walking into a quiet old house, only to realize it is not quiet at all. From the kitchen to the attic, from the parlor to the hallway, every single clock ticks in unison, like 100 hidden hearts. At first, it feels odd. Then the night arrives. 12 strokes echo through the walls, steady and expected. But before you can breathe, a 13th chime crashes through the silence. Every clock in the house strikes 13 at the exact same moment. The sound is too heavy, too loud, from somewhere outside of time. The air grows colder. Shadows stretch where they should not move. And then you notice the 13th chime does not end. It lingers. It waits. You realize this house is not measuring time. It is keeping something trapped, and some keep secrets sealed in locked rooms. But the house you are about to hear of was haunted by something far stranger. Time itself. Every visitor felt it. The uneasy rhythm of the ticking. The way each room seemed to move in the hands of the clocks. Dozens of them stood in every corner. Tall, proud grandfather clocks. Delicate brass carriage clocks. Even cheap kitchen timers that should have stopped working years ago. They were not decoration. They were guardians. And when the night came, they moved as one. 12 chimes rang in steady succession, as tradition demanded. A note that should never exist. Too deep, too heavy, too long. That single sound that no one should ever open. A door to the unmade hour. It was the moment the passed down like an heirloom no one truly wanted, but no one dared to abandon. When I first walked through its doors, I thought the creaking floors and the dusty corners were just ordinary signs of age. But the deeper I went, the more I realized that this house wasn't growing old. It was simply waiting. Waiting for me. Every room seemed to hum with a strange energy, and at the center of it all were the clocks. They weren't just scattered casually around. They were placed carefully, deliberately, as if each one had a purpose in some larger design. I counted more than 30 before I stopped keeping track. Each one wound tight, each one alive with its own restless heartbeat. The sound was maddening, not a soothing tick-tock, but a layered chorus that grew louder the longer you listened, until it felt like the house itself was breathing around you. The entries inside weren't ordinary notes about chores or family affairs. They were warnings. Each page detailed moments when the clocks had struck 13. Each entry more frantic than the last. She wrote about shadows that didn't belong to her, about voices whispering from the out the pantry turning colder, as if winter had slipped inside. At the bottom of one page, her words trembled. The 13th chime is the hour that doesn't belong to us. If you hear it, do not believe. Do not move. And above all, do not look in the mirror. I closed the journal slowly, my hands shaking. A mirror. Somewhere in this house was a mirror that wasn't just glass. And if Aunt Lita's words were true, the clocks weren't keeping time at all. They were keeping something out. Or worse, keeping something in. This journal lingered in my mind all, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more curious I became. What kind of mirror could hold power over an entire house? What was it that she feared so much she dared not even describe it? By late afternoon, I found myself searching. Every hallway, every dusty storage space, every room I hadn't yet explored. The house seemed eager for me to look, guiding me with faint drafts and faint creaks that made me turn corners I otherwise would have passed. Eventually, in one of the spare bedrooms upstairs, I discovered it. The mirror was tall and heavy, covered with a thin sheet of faded cloth. Its frame was ornate, carved with winding patterns of vines and thorns, as if it had been designed to trap whatever looked into it. 4 small clocks had been fixed to its corners with wax, each one still ticking, each one stubbornly alive. The moment I saw it, my chest tightened. This was it. This I told myself to obey. But something in the air compelled me, a pull stronger than fear itself. Slowly, almost against my will, I lifted the cloth. The glass was not smooth. It seemed to ripple faintly, as though I were staring into water instead of a reflection. My own face looked back at me, but wrong. Too pale, too sharp, my eyes darker than they should have been. Behind my reflection, the room looked slightly altered. The wallpaper was whole instead of peeling, furniture polished instead of dusty, and on the bed were a pair of shoes neatly placed. But when I turned around, the shoes were there. My breath caught in my throat. On lighting, do not breathe. Yet there I was, lungs heaving, heart racing, unable to stop myself. Then it happened. From deep inside, their hands jerking forward as if they were trying to escape. One of them chimed once, out of sync, a single hollow note that seemed to rattle the window panes. And then, for just an instant, the shadow leaned closer. A whisper brushed against my ear, though no one stood beside me. The voice was low, broken, and ancient. 13. I staggered back, nearly tripping over the bed frame. The coif slipped from my hands and fell to the floor, leaving the mirror exposed. I wanted to cover it again, but I couldn't move. My body refused. The clocks surrounding it were no longer just ticking, they were breathing. That was when I understood. The house didn't collect clocks because Aunt Lida loved them. She collected them because they were the only things keeping the 13th hour from spilling into our world. That night, I didn't dare close my eyes. The journal sat open on my lap. The mirror still uncovered in the next room. And the ticking of the clocks echoed like a heartbeat. That wasn't me. Midnight crept closer with a weight I could feel in my bones. When the 12th stroke rang out, I held my breath. I counted in silence as the sound faded. And then it came. The 13th. It was heavier this time. Louder, as though the house itself had grown hollow just to let it pass through. The floorboards trembled. The glass in the windows quivered. And in the spare room, the mirror began to hum. I crept toward it, my candle shaking in my hand. The reflection was no longer my own. A woman stood in the glass, wearing clothes from another century, her eyes sunken but sharp. She looked like family. My cheekbones, my jaw, my blood. But she was not me. Her lips moved slowly, mouthing words I couldn't hear. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to flee the house and never return. But my feet carried me closer, as if the 13th chime, until the sound of their ticking merged into a roar. The woman in the mirror raised her hand and pointed, not at herself, not at the glass, but at me. The air grew colder. The candle extinguished itself with a sudden hiss. In the darkness, I heard steps pacing across the attic floor. Someone or something was walking where no one should be. The journal's words flashed in my mind. Do not look at the mirror during the 13th. Do not breathe. But I had already broken both rules. The attic steps grew louder, descending the staircase now. My heart hammered, but I couldn't move. The house was holding me in place, binding me with invisible threads. The pulsed with light like a beating heart, and from within it came a whisper, low and certain. You are the next keeper. I gasped. The sound of my breath was enough. The windows cracked. The walls shook. And the woman in the mirror pressed her hand against the glass as if she were about to step through. I stumbled backward, clutching the journal, praying it would save me the way it had saved Aunt Lida. But deep down, I knew the truth. Her writings weren't instructions on how to survive. They were confessions. She hadn't escaped the 13th hour. She had only delayed it. And now it was my turn. The footsteps from the attic slowed, then stopped just beyond the top stair. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. It was a silence that waited. My body felt like stone, pinned to the floor, but my ears strained to hear what would come next. Then a voice whispered, not from the mirror this time, but from my candle lay extinguished on the floor. But I didn't need light to feel what was watching me from above. Something descended the attic steps. Not a person, not exactly. I never saw a face, only a weight pressing against the air. A distortion that bent the room out of shape. The walls shivered, the clocks swayed on their nails. Pulsed brighter with every step it took. The journal slipped from my hands, falling open to a page I hadn't read before. My eyes darted to the ink, desperate for answers. The unmade will come when you fail. It does not kill, it collects. It feeds on the minutes we waste, the breaths we shouldn't take, the glances we shouldn't dare. That is why the clocks must stay wound. That is why the 13th must never be ignored. My throat tightened. I realized then what Aunt Lita had done. All she had been tithing her attention, her fear, her very breath, to keep the unmade at bay. And now that she was gone, the debt had fallen to me. The attic hatch groaned wider, and a cold wing spilled down the stairs, carrying the smell of iron and ash. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and I saw the woman again. This time, she wasn't just standing behind me. She was closer, her face pressing against the glass. Her eyes burning with a hunger I recognized too well. I tried to move, to cover the mirror again, but my body refused. My hands trembled at my sides. Useless. The 13th chime had marked me, and the house knew I belonged to it now. The voice from the rafters spoke once more, deeper this time, echoing in my chest like a second heartbeat. A keeper must be chosen. Time does not wait for the unwilling. The mirror flickered, as if the exchange had already been made. And in that moment, I understood. The 13th hour was not a curse. It was an inheritance. The moment I saw my reflection trapped inside the mirror, panic clawed at me. My hands shot forward, pressing against the cold glass, desperate to pull myself free. But the surface did not give way. Instead, it pulsed like flesh beneath my palms. My reflection's lips curled into a knowing smile, as though it had been waiting centuries for me to arrive. The clock struck again. Not 12, not 13. They rang all at once, without rhythm or order. A chaotic storm of sound that shook the entire house. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the walls moaned as if they were alive. The attic hatch yawned wider, and the blackness inside it began to spill downward like ink in water, flooding the staircase, stretching its fingers. The boards hissed as though burning. The journal pages fluttering without wind. One line seemed to scream from the paper. The 13th will always demand a body. If it cannot take a stranger, it will take the keeper. I realized then that Aunt Lida had not died peacefully. She had been consumed. And unless I found a way to resist, I would share her fate. The figure in the moon pressed harder against the glass. I could see the details of her face now. The sharp jawline, the hollow cheeks, the empty eyes. They were my features, distorted and starved, as though I were looking at a corpse that bore my name. She raised her hand, mirroring mine, and when our palms touched, I felt her skin. Cold, wet, real. The attic shadow surged forward, colliding with the mirror in a burst of silence so complete it stole the sound from my own gasp. As if mocking my struggle, behind her, the glass rippled with faces. Dozens of them, pale, hollow-eyed keepers who had come before me, each one swallowed by the 13th hour, each one still watching, waiting for me to take my place among them. The attic shadow moved closer, its shape expanding, unfolding like a cloak that wanted to drape over my body. The smell of rust and ash grew unbearable. My chest ached as I realized I was already forgetting the rhythm of my own breath, as though the house itself wanted to breathe. I forced my eyes down to the journal. There had to be something, anything that could break this chain. My fingers tore through the pages until I found one scrawled in frantic handwriting, ink smeared by shaking hands. The mirror can only take what you give it. If you surrender willingly, you remain. If you resist, it steals you whole. Trick it and you may survive. Trick it. The word burned in my mind, her hand sliding through, as though the barrier were softening. Cold fingers brushed mine. She whispered again, faint but sharp. Breathe. I knew what she wanted. One breath would seal my fate. The 13th would claim me, and I would vanish into the mirror with all the others. Instead, I did something else. I smiled. I leaned forward, close enough that my lips nearly touched the glass, and whispered, "Take the 13th itself." For a moment, nothing happened. The house groaned in fury. The clocks shuddered, and the shadows surged forward, as if to punish me for daring to defy it. But then the mirror warped violently, its surface twisting like water in a storm. My reflection screamed silently, her face melting, dissolving into fractured shards of light. The attic shadow recoiled, dragged backward like the collapse of an entire world. I stumbled back as the mirror cracked straight down the middle. A burst of air slammed through the room, extinguishing every candle, rattling every door, shattering the silence of the 13th hour. And then its glass scattered like ice across the floor. The clocks had fallen silent, their pendulums swaying gently as though exhausted. For the first time since I arrived, the house no longer felt alive, but deep in the splintered mirror, one shard continued to shimmer faintly, and in its reflection, I saw something that made my blood freeze. I was smiling back at myself. Only this time, it wasn't me. I stared at the shard on the floor. Its fake, vapid distortion had twisted my reflection. But then, it blinked. I hadn't blinked. My knees nearly buckled as I backed away, heart hammering against my ribs. The house was silent now, the clocks frozen, the attic sealed in stillness. But silence can be deceptive. It doesn't always mean safety. It can mean something is listening. The shard trembled on the floor, sliding across the boards, as if pulled by invisible fingers. It stopped at my feet. My reflection tilted its head, studying me with patient amusement. Then its lips moved again, and this time I heard the word clearly, like a whisper escaping from under the floorboards. Keeper. I clenched my fists. No, I said, my voice shaking. I broke you. It's over. But the shard only pulsed brighter. And then, from the hallway, the first tick began. One clock, then another. I covered my ears. The sound drilled into my skull. Each tick was a heartbeat, and each heartbeat belonged to the house. The 13th chime returned. Not from the clocks this time, but from inside me. My chest rattled with the sound, as though my bones were hollow bells. I dropped to my knees, gasping, feeling the rhythm seep into my blood. A shard shimmered, and in its reflection, I no longer saw my face. I saw Aunt Rita. Her hollow eyes locked onto mine, her mouth moving with the same warning she had written in her journal. Do not breathe. But it was too late. I had already taken my breath. The room spun. All I had done was exchange places with whatever waited inside. The mirror was broken, yes, but the hour didn't need glass anymore. It had me. When I looked down at the shard one last time, my reflection smiled wider, its teeth gleaming too sharp to be human. And in the suffocating clearness of ticking and chimes, I finally understood Aunt Lyda's curse. The 13th never ends, and now neither will I.